Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Sitting in the leather chair in my study, I stared at the monitor in front of me, which flashed the email the private investigator had just sent. The sunlight from the window slanted in through the cracks in the blinds, leaving a golden trail of light on the keyboard. I took a deep breath and hung my finger above the mouse, hesitant to click on that attachment. $2,000 for the truth lay in this email, and I was suddenly afraid to face it. It's not like me. I've always been a rational person, but at the moment, I feel like my heart is racing with the flickering of the screen. The clues in life have been predicting this for a long time. Brenda's latest antics, she's always avoiding looking at her phone and quickly turning the screen off whenever I'm near. The intimacy between us was dwindling, and she always said she was too tired. These details are like a trickle that converges into my inner turmoil. After 5 years of marriage, I thought I knew Brenda pretty well. When they had first met at that dinner party that neither wanted to attend, her smile had brightened up the room. At the time, she had just ended a nightmare marriage to her ex-husband Marcus, a violent alcoholic who had been arrested by the police during a drunken brawl. I will always remember the fear in her eyes and the quiver in her voice when she talked about that experience. It was as if our meeting was destiny. At a dinner party for mutual friends, I was struck by her genuine way of listening. She will look intently into your eyes, as if your voice is the only one in the world worth her attention at the moment. After a year of dating, we entered into marriage. Marriage has brought me not only Brenda, but her 18-year-old daughter Karen. I never expected to be immediately recognized by Karen, but I also didn't expect the wall to be so difficult to cross. She was polite but detached, as if she were treating a tenant she had to put up with. I can understand that, after all, I'm not her real father, and I've never tried to take that place. I do what I can to adjust my role and find a way to get along that works for everyone. I took care of them, loved them, and accepted the fact that Karen would probably only ever think of me as her mother's husband. Honestly, I think that's just fine. I bought Karen the car she liked, although she complained that the color wasn't her favorite. I also set up a sizable college fund for her, which I earned over time. However, in recent months, everything has been different. Our home, the harbor that I had poured all my heart and soul into building, began to grow strange. Brenda was like a stranger living under the same roof, and the temperature between us was draining a little. The subtle changes add up. Less intimacy, fewer conversations, and her oft-repeated phrase, "I'm too tired." What concerned me the most was her cell phone, the electronic device that never left her hand. Whenever I walked into the room, she would hastily set it aside and pretend to be doing something else. I took in all these details and pretended not to notice, but they were like a thorn in my side. I'm not an idiot. These are more than obvious warning signs. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe it was the stress of the job that was causing it. Maybe I was doing something wrong, or something I wasn't doing right. But as time went on, the voice that kept swirling around in my head became harder and harder to ignore. Eventually, I made a decision. Hiring a private investigator was not an easy choice, but I needed to know the truth. A good private investigator doesn't come cheap, and $2,000 for the truth lies in this email before me. It's worth every penny because the truth is better than the unknown. And now, that truth is at my fingertips, just a click away from being revealed. My finger still hangs above the mouse, hesitant. In a way, clicking on this email meant changing something forever. But I knew I had to face it all. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened my eyes again, my hands were no longer shaking. The click of the mouse sounded crisp in the silence of the study, like a hammer shattering the last of the trust between us. The content unfolded on the screen a little bit, the photos, the timestamps, the location records, all clear to me. That's the truth I paid $2,000 to get. My wife Brenda is cheating on me with her ex-husband Marcus, the man who used to beat her, the man I thought she'd long ago gotten rid of for good. Looking at the evidence, I felt a pang of numbness. Not anger, not sadness, just numbness. Maybe that's what it feels like when your worst suspicions are confirmed. I turned off the monitor and leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. The afternoon sun was still shining through the blinds, but the temperature in this room seemed to have dropped to freezing. I knew that from this moment on, everything would be different. But I don't let anger get the best of me, I don't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I'll handle this the best way I know how, calm, rational, and organized. After all, it's my specialty. Early the next morning, I sat at the dining room table and watched the sunlight pour in through the kitchen window. The aroma of coffee filled the air. The sound of clinking cutlery and the rustle of turning newspapers filled the space. It was a daily picture of our family life, and it looked like business as usual, but only I knew it was about to be shattered. Brenda is sitting across from me, flipping through the local paper and absently stirring her black tea. Karen sat to my right, swiping down on her cell phone as usual, that familiar look of indifference on her face. The image used to make me feel warm and reassured, but at the moment it was only a bitter irony. I took small sips of my coffee and waited for the upcoming conversation. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Brenda put down the paper and folded it neatly on the table, her fingers lingering on the edge of the paper as if searching for the courage to speak. "Brian, I have something to tell you." Her voice was unusually soft. I put down my coffee cup and looked straight into her eyes. "Yes, dear, please." My tone was calm, even with a hint of encouragement. She hesitated, her fingers unconsciously fiddling with the edges of the tablecloth. "I'm going out for a month." The words were like a stone thrown into calm water. I leaned my body forward slightly. "Hmm?" Her shoulders tensed up as if preparing for her next words. "I mean, I'm going out for a month. I'm going to stay with Marcus." Her voice became firm. "It's his birthday month, and I want him to have a good time." I leaned back in my chair and let her words settle in the air. My expression didn't change, but I could feel a surge of heat in my chest. I forced myself to remain calm and responded in a calm but sharp tone. "So," I spoke slowly, "what are you going to do there? Clean his house, cook for him, sleep with him? Is he unable to afford prostitutes to serve him? Why do you want my legal wife to be his whore and babysitter?" I said as I sipped my coffee and tried to keep my emotions in check. Her eyes widened and she immediately retorted, "What are you talking about? I'm not a whore or a babysitter. I'm meant to be there as a wife." I slowly set down my coffee cup, each movement deliberately slowed down in an effort to keep my voice steady. "But you are my wife. Isn't what you plan to do with him a betrayal of our marriage?" Instead of flinching, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "No, because I told you ahead of time. So it's not cheating." I nodded, feeling the absurdity of her words. "Well then, what do you expect me to do? Wait here for 30 days for my wife to come back from having enough fun in another man's bed?" Her voice held annoyance. "Oh, come on, Brian. I have some desires that need to be fulfilled, and only Marcus can do that." I immediately picked up. "You mean the tie you to the bed and whip you kind of desires? Those are the desires." I had long since seen the texts and videos, and those images could never be erased from my memory. I kept a calm expression, but inside I was churning with anger. I looked her straight in the eye and continued, "You have desires, what about mine? How am I going to fulfill my desires?" She waved her hand in annoyance. "Whatever. But when I get back, you're going to continue to be a faithful husband." I leaned forward, my tone cold and determined. "What if my desires aren't satisfied after 30 days? What if I found a better way to fulfill it and don't want to come back to you? Would that be okay?" An annoyed look crosses her face, but before she can answer, I turn to Karen, who has been silent. "Karen, what do you think? Do you think your mother should risk ruining her marriage for a new lover?" Karen looked at me with a hint of contempt and said, "She has her needs and desires. You don't own her. She's not your slave, and she can quench her thirst in any pool." The arrogance in her tone was like a slap in the face. Apparently, Karen wasn't just being supportive of her mother. She was enjoying the thrill of telling me to fuck off. She was not an outsider, not a bystander. From her eyes and tone of voice, I understood that she was involved. "She also goes to Marcus' house." The realization twisted me up inside, but I maintained my outward composure. I held up my hands in a gesture of surrender. "Since that's what you all want, I won't be a stumbling block." A smug smile appeared at the corner of Brenda's mouth, an expression that hurt more than any of her words. But I'm not done. I continued in a calm but firm tone. "However, Brenda, I would like you to sign a document stating that we are officially separated for the next 30 days. During that time, I will have no financial responsibility to you or your daughter, and I will be free to move about and fulfill my desires." Brenda narrowed her eyes, skepticism in her tone. How is this going to work? I leaned back in my chair, keeping my cool and collected. It's simple. I'll call my lawyer now. He'll draw up the necessary paperwork, and we'll just go to court tomorrow to confirm it. I paused for a moment to let her digest the information, then added with a hint of sarcasm, "Look, I'm paving the way for you. You can be with Tom, Dick, or Harry for those 30 days, and since we're separated, it won't count as cheating." A small smile appeared at the corner of my mouth as I continued, "And I, too, can fulfill my desires without fear." Her eyes became more skeptical. "Did I miss something? Why are you doing this?" I slowly stood up and towered over her, certainty in my tone. "Because, Brenda, your words have made it clear that you're not going to stop, so there's no point in me stopping you." I gave her a meaningful smile, and to be honest, I could use the opportunity to satisfy my desires properly. Karen put on a smug smile and said, "Mom, that's a great idea. I didn't realize Brian could be so supportive." I turned to her and responded with the same arrogant smile, "Oh, you don't know me yet." Without waiting for them to respond, I walked out of the room, my cell phone already in my hand. I dialed my attorney's number and said two simple words, "Get started." In the afternoon, my attorney sat on the couch in our living room, arranging papers neatly on the coffee table. Sunlight slanted in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting thin shadows on those papers. I noticed the meaningful look in the lawyer's eyes as he handed Brenda the papers, but she was completely oblivious. She didn't even look at the papers, she just picked up a pen and signed them, each action oozing with a blinding confidence. I leaned back on the couch and watched her, a small smile, if any, appearing at the corners of my mouth as she signed the last word. "It's all done now," I said calmly, "and it will be official tomorrow." The words were like a long-buried seed that had finally found the soil in which to germinate. That night, I told Brenda I was going out for a drink. I left without explanation or excuse. As I walked out the door, I felt the look she cast with a hint of doubt in it, but more relief. It struck me as ironic that she thought she was finally free, not realizing that it was a trap I had carefully laid out. It was late when I got back, and I made sure it was late enough to avoid any conversation with her. I wasn't drunk, but I needed the excuse to keep up appearances. The next morning, the sun was bright and blinding. As we stood in the courtroom, there was a solemnity in the air around us. Brenda stood beside me, still keeping that chesty look as if this was just a routine. The judge scanned the papers, his expression bland but his eyes revealing a hint of imperceptible suspicion. "Mrs. Brenda Wilson," he looked up from the stack of papers with an imperceptible hint of warning in his voice, "have you had your attorney review this document? For the next 30 days, your husband will not be responsible for the financial support of you and your daughter, and he can do whatever he wants. Are you sure you accept these conditions?" Brenda nods without hesitation, an easy smile on her face. "Yes, Your Honor." There's an ease in her tone that sends chills down my spine. The judge shrugged. "Fine." There seemed to be a hint of helplessness in his voice, as if he had foreseen some inevitable outcome. That night, I stood in the bedroom doorway and watched Brenda busy packing. She moved briskly, her face beaming with a joy I hadn't seen in months. Watching her get so giddy like that was a stark contrast to the tension we've been feeling in our house lately. I leaned against the doorframe, arms wrapped around me, and watched it all with an expressionless face. The room smelled of her usual perfume. The scent that had once warmed me was now ironic and unfamiliar. She looked up at me every now and then, her excitement overflowing. "Oh, thank you, Brian. You don't know how happy I am. I'll make it up to you when I get back." There was an innocent cruelty in her words, as if she was completely unaware of what she was destroying. It almost made me want to laugh out loud, but I kept my composure. I smiled lightly. "Oh, don't worry about that. I'll make sure I'm happy." There was a sharp knife hidden in my words, but she obviously didn't notice. When I finished, I turned to leave, steady on my feet but reeling inside. The light from the hallway pulled long shadows behind me, like a preview of the revenge plan that was about to unfold. Everything was ready, every detail calculated. It's time to execute the plan. I've always prided myself on being a rational person, the kind of person who can control their emotions and focus on rational solutions. But standing here right now, watching this place I once called home about to fall apart, I feel an indescribable pain, an indescribable sense of loss. It's not just the loss of Brenda, it's something deeper. The life we have built together, the small expectations, the warm moments, will all come to nothing. But then again, she had destroyed our marriage long before this moment. When I think back on all the effort I put into her daughter over the years, all the time, energy, and money, it all seems like a ridiculous joke now. The new car I bought her daughter, the Honda she complained the color wasn't perfect, the sizable college fund I worked overtime to build for her, the money that was supposed to pave the way for her future. It all becomes meaningless. And in exchange for what? In exchange for her daughter arrogantly telling me I don't own her mother? Life is never easy. It reminds me of Newton's third law, action and reaction forces. This fundamental truth of the universe still stands. And now, I'm going to prove it with my counterpoint. The plan for revenge was taking shape in my mind, each step clear and calm. That night, Brenda left with her daughter to reunite with her ex-husband, Marcus. I stood on the porch and made sure I waved goodbye to them one last time. They deserve to see this goodbye. This false gesture of goodwill will be the perfect opening for my plan of revenge. I watched as their car slowly pulled away until it disappeared under the streetlight around the corner. Once their car had completely disappeared from sight, I walked into the kitchen and pulled a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey out of the cabinet. I poured a large glass, added a few cubes of ice, and watched the amber liquid shimmer in the light. I take a small sip and let the warmth of the alcohol slide down my throat. At the moment, it's the only thing that feels familiar to me. The sound of ice cubes clinking against the walls of a glass echoed through the empty house, like a beat for a plan that was about to unfold. Then I picked up the phone, slid my fingers across the keypad, and dialed the number that had been prepared. It's about time. The silence in the room was broken by my voice. Everything's ready. My voice was steady with a calm certainty. Let's get the show on the road. After a brief response from the person on the other end of the line, I hung up and looked out the window into the night, a cold smile appearing at the corners of my mouth. The next morning I woke up with a clear plan. Sunlight poured in through the cracks in the curtains, gilding my plan of action with a determined glow. The first thing to deal with was the car I bought for Karen. It was a Honda, and she loved it when she first saw it, even though she always complained that the color wasn't her favorite. It doesn't matter now. She can go and get her real father Marcus to buy her a new car in any color. Next up is Brenda's car. The car she was always so proud of. She always bragged it was the best thing I ever did for her. I couldn't help but sneer at the thought. She never really appreciated the man who worked tirelessly just to give her everything she wanted. Now, for the next 30 days, Marcus can take care of her transportation. I won't be offering those comforts anymore. After dealing with the car, I turned to the house. Honestly, it's too big for them. I'm tired of hearing them complain over the years about wanting a smaller, more cozy house, like Marcus. Well, they're in one now. Might as well make this permanent. They won't be back here anytime soon anyway. It took me a whole day to convert all the assets into a transferable form. By the end of the day, I had what I needed, $2 million, or more accurately in my offshore account. Looking at the numbers on my computer screen, I felt a strange sense of relief. There will be no more sacrifices. Now I can finally do what I want to do, and no one or thing can stop me. 3 days passed, and the silence was almost calming. I enjoyed the peace, like the calm before a storm. Then the expected phone rang. It's Brenda. Her voice was shaking, as if she was trying to keep her composure, but the panic was still evident through the microphone. I called the house phone, but no one answered. Where are you? There was a hint of anxiety and unease in her voice. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. I picked up the glass of wine that was resting in my hand and took a slow sip, replying nonchalantly, "What about fulfilling my desires?" With that said, I hung up without giving her a chance to respond. Let her savor the words. That night, my cell phone kept ringing. First Brenda, then Karen. They called in turn, the anger and panic in their voices becoming more and more evident. I can probably guess why. They must have gotten a notice from the bank already. The joint account is empty and the college fund is gone. I could almost imagine their faces when they found out about it, and I understood why they were so shocked. They had no idea what was going on. But honestly, how was I going to fulfill my desires if all the money was locked up in those accounts? But I didn't answer immediately. The phone kept ringing and I still didn't respond. Let them digest this mess I've left behind. I imagined them panicking and felt a strange sense of satisfaction. It took another 3 days, 3 full days of constant ringing, before I finally decided to answer the phone. "Hey Brenda, how are you?" My voice was casual, almost relaxed, with a hint of intentional teasing. "Sorry, I haven't been able to take your call as I've been busy fulfilling my desires." I could feel the shock and anger on the other end of the line, but it was exactly the effect I wanted. The game has just begun. I put the phone down and looked out the window at the night view of Bangkok. Unlike the serenity of my hometown, the city is vibrant even late at night. As the month draws to a close, it's time for the drama to come to a climax. I picked up my cell phone and dialed my attorney. "They'll be back today. Please send my gift." Back when I was a software analyst, I received several partnership offers from a company in Bangkok. At the time, I didn't think it was necessary. Life was good enough. But now, when everything has been broken up and reorganized, I think it's time to accept the invitation. When the plane landed in Bangkok, I turned on my cell phone and already had a picture in my mind of their faces as they received their gifts. At the moment, Brenda and Karen are on their way back to the place they once called home. At the door, there was already a man standing there waiting. "Is this Miss Brenda Wilson, please?" The man inquired professionally. Brenda nodded, a mixture of confusion and unease on her face. "Here are the papers for you." The man handed over a craft envelope, took a few steps back and snapped a picture, then turned and left without another word. That moment was frozen in the flash of the camera and was one of the most beautiful images I've ever seen. Brenda stood there, envelope in hand, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. And Karen stood beside her, completely shocked, her eyes scanning the empty driveway. "Jesus, where's my car?" Her voice was shaking. As I expected, the phone rang immediately afterward. I let them continue to ring and didn't dial her number until after I had settled into my hotel room. I didn't even need to say anything. She immediately picked up the phone with anger in her voice. "You're not a man of honor. You're jealous of Marcus, and you can't afford to have your pride damaged." Her voice was shrill, and she kept throwing out those insulting words that every wife caught cheating on her husband says. I didn't interrupt her or even flinch. I just listened quietly, waiting for my turn. This time I won't hang up and run away. "Did you open the envelope?" I asked calmly. The sound of paper flipping came from the other end of the line. Inside were photos of her and Marcus having sex, complete with timestamps and locations, and even included those of her tied to the bed. You knew all along." Her voice wavered for the first time. "Yes," I said calmly, "I know." I could almost feel her digesting this fact, the weight of the truth pressing down on her. "Since you've chosen your own bed," I continued, "I'll make sure you get to lie in it." "You never tried to stop me," she said. "Oh no, why should that stop you? The moment you decided to cheat, you ended our marriage. Besides, between a betrayed bitch and a Jamaican vacation, why would I choose the former?" The next part was almost too easy. Divorce proceedings have been filed for adultery, and I've set aside some money in a joint account, hopefully enough for you to reach Marcus' house. I could feel the tension on the other end of the line, the naked anger, but I didn't care anymore. The ball is no longer in her court. Her voice screamed through the phone, full of desperation. "You didn't leave your daughter any money. How is she going to go to college?" Without hesitation, I shot back, "She won't be on it." I said firmly, "At least not on my dime. She's not my daughter, and her behavior proves that over and over again. She can go to college on her father's dime." After a long silence, I heard the phone being snatched away. Karen's voice followed with another round of screams and insults. I knew this would be the last conversation, the last time I would hear their voices. So I bear it patiently. "You sold my car." Her voice swung between anger and disbelief. "No, I responded without flinching. I sold my car. You took my college fund. There was desperation in her voice. I could no longer contain the bitterness within me. No, I replied coldly. I made sure I had the money to fund my desire to vacation in Jamaica. Besides, it was money and I got it back. As you said, your mom can drink from any pool, and so can I. She screamed again, her voice shaking with anger and frustration. How am I going to explain this to my friends? My car is gone. I was unmoved. Tell them your loser stepfather sold it to finance his Jamaican vacation. Now I'm going back to live with my biologically superior father. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, and then Brenda snatched the phone back. Her voice was accusatory. You stole our money. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I said, my tone completely calm. You signed that legal document waiving my financial responsibility to you. I spent all my money in those 30 days, and now I have nothing. She immediately shot back in disbelief. You want me to believe that? I laughed. I never asked you to believe me, but in court I'll prove it. I ended the call with a calm summary. For further contact, please call my attorney. His number is in the envelope. Have a nice day, Brenda. A few days later, as I expected, Brenda tried to fight the divorce. But I am confident in my lawyer's abilities. When Brenda claimed that I knew and agreed that she was living with her ex-husband, my attorney showed photos with timestamps and locations. Your Honor, my attorney said, his voice clear and strong, Mrs. Wilson had a relationship with Mr. Parker prior to this 30-day period, which constitutes infidelity because Mr. Wilson had no knowledge of it. Therefore, it is false to claim that my client had prior knowledge of and consented to her infidelity with her ex-husband. She deceived her husband and betrayed the marital trust. Then my attorney quickly proved that I had indeed spent every penny on a vacation to Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. Receipts, invoices, everything is legal and valid. More importantly, Brenda signed away her financial responsibility during that 30-day period. The judge, while not a fool, knew that this whole situation reeked of manipulation and deception, but there was nothing he could do about it. The documents were all filed flawlessly, and the legal procedures were all followed. He was bound by these legal forms, even if he could see through the elaborate hoax. He ordered a proper liquidation of any remaining assets. At this point, Brenda's attorney, apparently desperate, attempted to raise the issue of child support. But my attorney immediately objected in a firm tone. He pointed out the obvious. Karen is not my daughter, biologically or legally. I never adopted her, and the judge knew that was a key detail that made child support meaningless. But my lawyers didn't stop there. He went on to take a bold action, one that only made the whole situation more ridiculous. He argued that I had renounced all worldly responsibilities and chosen the path of a Buddhist monk. No income, no property, no obligations. It's a bold defense, but it worked. After the judge heard the whole process, he, who had kept his face expressionless, finally couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Brenda, a teasing smile on his lips. Tough luck, ma'am, he said, almost laughing. His words echoed through the courtroom, signaling the end of it all. I can't help you anymore. The divorce is granted and the money in the joint account goes to Brenda. A month after the divorce decree, I learned through various sources that Brenda and Karen had moved in with Marcus. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Bangkok apartment, I looked out at the city lights and imagined their new lives. Reality is far from what they think it is. The perfect family they dreamed of was just an illusion. Marcus remains true to his nature. That violent streak that used to beat up Brenda while drunk has never changed. I've heard that he still punches and kicks Brenda when he's drunk, just like he did in their previous marriage. But I guess Brenda likes it rough. After all, it's the life she chose. And Karen? She became a silent witness to it all, so powerless in the face of violence. Once high and mighty, she now has to walk or take the bus to school. Without the Honda that she claimed was less than perfect, without those luxuries that I gave. Gone are the comforts of life, replaced by the most basic needs of survival. Brenda can't leave Marcus because she has nowhere else to go, and all her support systems have collapsed. She was trapped in this nightmare she had tried so desperately to escape, but this time, no one would come to her rescue. I had been her safe haven, and now that harbor was closed forever. I opened my laptop and browsed through my recent work emails. The new company is booming and I am moving into a whole new phase of my career. The pace of life in Bangkok is completely different from back home, where everything is full of new possibilities. I began to learn Thai, assimilate into the local culture, and find a new life path of my own. In this foreign city, I began to rethink about the nature of revenge. My revenge against Marcus was never violent, but extremely simple. I gave him what he wanted. Now he must feed and care for his new family, his 30-day wife, and her daughter. Let him face the consequences of his actions, and let him deal with the mess he has created. I gave him exactly what he wanted, but the gift came with a heavy price. Sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for, because they might actually come true. This truth is perfectly borne out in Marcus. Sitting in my apartment in Bangkok, I often think back to the whole thing. That calm morning seemed like a lifetime ago, when I was sitting in the same spot and opened the email from the private investigator. That moment changed everything, but it also set me free. I paid the price, but the rewards were obvious. Lost an unfaithful wife, but gained inner peace. Lost a false family, but gained the possibility of a new life. This turn of events has taught me a lot, most importantly. Sometimes the best revenge is not violence, but getting the other person what they think they want. As night falls, the streets of Bangkok begin to exude a unique charm. Street vendors push food carts and waft the aroma of Thai food. I decided to go downstairs and buy a pad Thai from a street stall, which has become a small habit in my new life. Walking through the bustling streets, I felt a sense of relief that I had never felt before. When I got back to my apartment, I got an email from a friend back home. He said Brenda looked much more haggard when she showed up in town recently. Marcus' violence seems to intensify, but she is powerless to change things. Karen had to give up some of the extracurricular activities she had planned because no one could afford those. I don't feel any particular pleasure or sadness after reading these messages. It's all about choices, and every choice has consequences. Brenda chooses to betray, Karen chooses to support her mother's betrayal, and Marcus chooses to repeat his violent nature. I'm just giving them a chance to realize those choices. I closed my laptop and walked out onto the balcony. Bangkok's night sky is dotted with stars, and the hustle and bustle of the city is like a never-ending symphony. Everything here reminds me that life always goes on, and no matter what we go through, we always find a way to move forward. I can't help but find it ironic when I think about where Brenda is right now. She had tried so hard to escape Marcus' violence, and now she was willingly returning to that nightmare. Maybe this was the life she really wanted, an environment of excitement and danger. Instead, I, the one who tried to give her a peaceful life, became the representative of uninteresting in her eyes. As for Karen, her arrogance finally got a reality check. Without those conveniences I provided, she had to face life as it really was. The experience of walking or squeezing a bus to school every day might teach her something about gratitude. But these lessons come too late. The damage has been done and trust has been broken. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the last bottle I'd brought from home. The amber liquid shimmers in the glass at night, just like the old days I remember. I raise my glass to the lights of the city and drink to those days gone by and to the peace of the present. This city has given me a new start, a new identity, new possibilities. Here, no one knows about my past. No one will look at me with sympathy or pity. I am just one of the many foreigners trying to carve out their own future in this land. And in my distant hometown, my story is probably being told. How a betrayed husband plotted the perfect revenge, and how he accomplished it with law and intelligence rather than violence. But they won't know that the real victory is not in the perfection of revenge, but in the opportunity to start over. I put my glass down and looked out at the Bangkok night sky once again. Tomorrow, the sun will still rise and the city will continue its never-ending rhythm. And I, for one, will continue to write a new chapter of my life here. As for Brenda, Karen, and Marcus, their stories are in the past and serve as a lesson in my life. Be careful what you wish for, because they may come true, and the cost of fulfillment is often more than you can imagine. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.